Right then, continuing on where we left off, we brought up some other issues in terms of division and unity. A wall is a border, a boundary, it divides. A wall does also protect. So you might think of, protecting your property from theft or whatever. But it seems like this is a really old wall, and he's like, there's no fear that my apple trees are gonna kind of get across the wall and eat your pine cones. So apparently they just have trees here now. And that's what the neighbor says to him. Okay, so in terms of the two characters, we have the speaker, and then we have the neighbor. And the speaker has a different attitude about it all. He's playful. He's asking questions. He's maybe more open. But we're going to see about the neighbor, how is the neighbor described, and now the neighbor, interacts here. So he, that is the neighbor, only says, "Good fences make good neighbors." So, he had said something. He said, "I tell him," but there were no quotation marks. In this case, there's quotation marks on the dialogue for this statement, "Good fences make good neighbors." And so this is a quote. He's quoting someone else's words. "Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense." So in this case, there's really no need for this wall, because the original purpose was to hold animals in. Okay, so to block animals from escaping. Animals would wander off from your property if you own sheep or cows or something. So you build a wall, you keep your animals in there. So essentially, what the neighbor's saying is like, what's the purpose of this fence anymore? Its original purpose is like gone. So why do we have this? Notice we have a pun here, give offense. So the pun is on the sound of the word in this case. Like offense sounds like a fence. So it's a pun on the idea of a wall or a fence, like a barrier. But he's asking, like, what am I walling in and what am I walling out? What am I blocking? Who am I blocking? It's a restriction, boundary, the border. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. Now he's back repeating that original line, right? Something there is that doesn't love a wall. And what we connected that before was something natural, something in nature. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly. And I'd rather he said it for himself. So what's he talking about here, elves? What are elves? Well, elves are forest creatures. They usually live in the forest and build their houses in the forest. They live for a super long time. They're natural. They're kind of nature spirits or creatures. So again, the something that doesn't like it, he's saying, is that which is natural. He's saying walls are unnatural in a way. That's why they have to be constantly repaired. But he wants the neighbor to say this for himself. He doesn't want to just lecture and fight the neighbor. He wants the neighbor to realize that the wall is kind of pointless. Ironically, the wall divides and unifies. It does the opposite. So it does both, which is ironic. There's our irony. But he's using this opportunity to meet at the wall as they're fixing it to have a dialogue, right? He wants to ask questions. He wants to get the neighbor to think for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. All right, here's like, so the neighbor is being compared to an old stone savage. Well, what does that mean? Well, a savage would be a way of describing an ancient person who was maybe more barbaric. It's a negative term, very negative term, and he's armed. So this is hostile. This means fighting. This means violent. An old stone savage armed. So it's a negative description of the neighbor as someone who is maybe also a little bit uneducated. A savage is someone who's uneducated as well. Violent, they like to fight, they're aggressive, they guard their territory, they're very territorial. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me. Not of woods only, and the shade of trees. Now we've got this image of darkness, and this guy is moving in darkness, so there's the shadow from the woods and the trees, right? But he says, not of those kinds of shadows only. So he moves in a kind of darkness that is not a physical darkness, all right? So the neighbor is being associated with darkness, and that means also ignorance. Okay, so this whole uneducated, territorial, violent, old stone savage, the neighbor is being associated with this darkness, this savagery. Okay, not just of the shade of the trees, but a kind of moral or maybe intellectual darkness. It's being pictured there. He will not go behind his father's saying. And he likes it. Let's highlight father's saying there, or try to. I guess hit a button. Sorry. This guy has a little button, and I hit it sometimes, so I don't notice where my thumb is. Sorry about that. All right. he will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors. All right, so what is the source of the neighbor's kind of philosophy and ignorance? It has to do with his father's saying, tradition, custom. He's not questioning the purpose of the wall. It's just like, no, my dad said walls are good. Walls make good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors. And he won't go behind that. He won't go behind his father's saying. Okay? So the whole poem is contrasting the purpose of the walls, whether or not we think about why we have walls, structures, customs, traditions in society. What's their origin? Like, where did they come from? What's their purpose? And are these things like relevant? Are they relevant still? Are they something that we need? He's open. He, however, is closed. He's closed his mind. That's why the neighbor says, he wants him to think of it himself. He'd rather he said this for himself, to realize that it's unnatural. Some things are unnatural in traditions and customs and being, territorial, when you don't need to be anymore, really. Like, there's no purpose. You don't have any cows. But the wall does bring them together. It's a chance for community. It's a chance for communication as they talk and have a discussion once a year in the springtime. It's in the springtime when things grow, so it's a chance for a relationship. And so it uses the image of the wall in this double way throughout. It divides, it brings them together, it blocks them from community, it creates community. There are natural forces and unnatural. There are man-made and nature's elements going on. So, in this way, the poem is using language, but it definitely has a strong negative connotation at the end here, as he is described in the very negative terms. Darkness, which means ignorance, not thinking, being uneducated like a savage, and keeping barriers up between peoples that don't need to exist anymore. So overall, the poem gives us a negative view of tradition symbolized in the wall. But the speaker uses the opportunity still, even of this negative feature, as a way to communicate and try to reach the neighbor and teach the neighbor and have some kind of dialogue about the purpose and existence of the wall. All right, so that's Robert Frost's Mending Wall. Thanks, guys.